Hello everyone, back again. Tata Steel Chess round 9. Anish Giri with the white pieces versus Maxime Vachier with the black pieces. Let's get right into it. It's a pretty long game. We're gonna zoom through this with the top quality analysis that you're used to here on this channel. Thanks for joining me again. Hit the like, subscribe, all that stuff. Blah blah blah. Let's go. And also, if you know who this female chess player is right above me, let me know. I'll shout you out in the next video. And also, you can dictate which video you want me to do next, what content you want me to cover. So just let me know if you know who she is in the comment section below. So let's get to it. We have a knight off Sicilian on the board after the move a6 here. It's well known Lagrave is a specialist in this defense. He has been taking it taking it pretty rough this tournament, but he's sticking to what he knows here. Giri plays the move h3. It's a dual purpose move here in that it keeps pieces off the enemy pieces, that is, keeps pieces off g4. For instance, no bishop g4, no knight g4 possible, to annoy moves like bishop e3 in the future. And also the second idea behind that move is to also facilitate attacking moves like g4 later on in the future. So this is a well-known move. Black argues aggressively with the move e5. E5 is basically saying, hey, h3 is probably not the best move that you want to do in the opening, right? Classical chess, right? They would never play a move like h3 right in the opening, right? What happened to getting your minor pieces out and all of that stuff, right? So of course this is modern chess, so you see the exceptions, and it takes a master to really understand the exceptions in these type of positions. But let me say briefly that the position is what is known as a semi-closed position, meaning that it has attributes of both the open positions and the closed positions. In the open positions, you normally don't want to waste time in the opening, right? The position can open quickly, so tactics are paramount, and you really want to get your pieces developed quickly as possible. And closed positions are not really the same. Closed positions, you have a little more time since the center is usually blocked, and the tactical play seems to be a little slower in those type of positions. So the Sicilian is a hybrid where you have kind of a mixed here. So in this type of position where position is kind of closed, right, kind of open, right, it's kind of like quicksand, if you will, right? Black and white, for that matter, can get away with these quote-unquote time-wasting moves like h3 for white here and a6 for black, right? Let's remember, black is right, quote-unquote wasting a little time too with the move like a6. But in these kind of closed positions, you can kind of bend those rules a little bit, right? And of course, it took the great masters of the past to recognize and lay down for us, when we could, when it was okay to do such things. But that's basically, the ideas behind that. So h3 is not bad, just like a6 is not bad, but you have to be skilled in order to know when it's good to do these type of moves. So e5, right, challenging white right in the center. Knight comes back to f3. So right, without h3, it looks like just a normal a classical position. You would think e4, e5 might have been on the board, right? So what is white getting out of all of this? Well, white has a target, and that now the d pawn is backwards, and that is going to be, my friends, the crux of this game. This game is going to revolve around the struggle for the supremacy over the d5 square. If black can get the move d5 in, he will free his game, right? He will free his game, and he will destroy white center also by trading his d pawn for his e pawn. Okay, this will also allow black to free his dark squared bishop that you can see on f8. That it's a bad bishop. As long as those pawns are like that, that bishop is rendered ineffective. All right, but by trading his d pawn for white's e pawn, an idea you see in the Scandinavian defense, for instance, black will be able to free his game. So white has to stop black from making this move under favorable circumstances. In other words, if black does get an e5, it should be at the cost of an exchange or some other concession in the position. Black shouldn't just be able to get d5 in and get away with it. This is idea that this whole game is going to revolve around. There's bishop e7. All right. We're not impressed with that bishop. g4. There's the other idea. Castle. And now g5. What is g5 doing? Well, g5 is tickling the black position, right? Remember, black wants to play d5. The knight supports the d5 square. So g5 not only gains space, but it also just forces black to take a piece off of concentrating on d5. All right. So the arrows are there to show that pathway that black can take with this knight. In the game, Vachier played knight h5. Okay. However, he could have played knight of d7 with this idea of going, of course, to c5. So play could look, like this: knight of d7, bishop e3, knight c6, queen d2, knight c5 with the attack on the e pawn. Okay, and black is threatening already to play knight takes e4. Remember, it's all about d5 here. So how is this about d5? Well, you have to be careful if you're white, when your pieces are lined up on a third rank in this manner, especially in the Sicilian, because there's tactics where knight takes e4 and then d5. So for example, let's give black another move here, just for illustration, illustrative purposes. So knight takes e4, and now d5, and you can see the bishop on e3 is going to be captured if the knight moves. And that's just an example. So that's an idea Vachier could have opted for, is bringing the knight back to d7. And the idea he has in the game, knight h5, is, again, it's all about d5. Eventually, he's hoping to be able to settle that knight on f4, again, supporting the d5 advance. In some cases, he'll play g6 and bring the knight back to g7 and then e6. All right. But that's more of like a plan B if he has to give up on the idea of d5. Let's keep going. Bishop c4. Again, we already know what this is about. Bishop e6. Bishop b3. Of course, Giri does not trade on e6. It just would simply strengthen the black center, open up lines on the king side where black would be, have chances, right? You have an open f file for the rook, and black would welcome that. g6, bishop e3, and knight d7. This knight is coming to c5. Queen d2, rook c8. Typical Sicilian stuff. Exploiting the half open c file. Castle. Now knight c5. Okay, so now Giri makes an important decision here. He parts with his dark square bishop. Reason why he does that is, again, he wants to prevent d5. It's very important. So he gets rid of the dark square bishop, and now black cannot take with the pawn. Of course, he would love to take with the pawn, but he can't because of the pressure on the e5 square, and that's why the arrow is there to illustrate that. So rook takes e5. The battle continues. h4. Giri is a very pragmatic player. He reminds me, he plays like that style of like Karpov, Kramnik, those positional guys, right? He's not really like a Kasparov type, Tao type, not real like super dynamic, right? He plays a lot of like solid, strong moves. h4 is a good move here. It frees the knight on f3 and the queen on d2, right? For to move elsewhere, right? It solidifies that. He doesn't have to worry about tactics, the pawn getting captured on g5 and things like that. Now, knight f4. Remember, we talked about this earlier. Again, d5. Notice black has a rook on c5, knight on f4, bishop on e6. He's really trying to make this happen. Okay. King b1. And now queen a5 from Vachier. Now, after all is said and done, After all is said and done, bishop g4 is the correct move here. The knight is unprotected on f3. Bishop g4 of course, it gives up the fight directly for d5, but that's because there's a bigger fish to fry, and that's this unprotected knight here on f3. And really, the only move is a queen e3 here because the knight is pinned. You don't want to lose the exchange if you're white here. So queen e3, and now black can give up the exchange. And this typical Sicilian fashion, rook takes c3, and say queen takes c3, and then just queen c8. Again, the knight is in such a precarious spot. All white can really do is just come back and play queen e3, and then knight g2, queen e2, and knight f4, and the game will end in a draw. So I'm sure if you see this line again, or players follow this exact line, you will see this move bishop g4. Here, if queen takes c8, looking at my notes, if queen takes c8, then just rook takes c8, and again, the knight is vulnerable. There's no good way to protect that knight without giving up the exchange. Another idea here is b takes c3, same thing, knight g2, and again, there's no good way to protect that knight. So in hindsight, bishop g4 is good to draw for Lagrave there. Instead, he played queen a5, which is very reasonable. Knight e1 from Giri, again, just playing very solid. He wants to keep he wants to keep black saddled down with his weaknesses and just gradually trade off pieces. So here he wants to play knight e3, get rid of the powerful knight on f4. Again, it's about stopping d5. Rook f8, knight d3, queen takes d3, and now Vachier Lagrave is like, man, I can't get d5 in. Time to give up the exchange, right? He has good piece play, but notice how bad that bishop is on e7, and this is what happens when black's not able to get d5 in. All right, so rook takes c3, he goes for it, and he gets a good attack. On top of that, I mean, Giri made some mistakes here. So b takes c3 happened, and now thematic d5. Also possible was just rook takes here, queen d2, and then queen c5. That was possible. Might have been better, but he went for a d5. After all, he's been waiting to play that move, for a long time now. His dark square bishop is now free to enter into the game. E takes d5, bishop f5 from Vachier Lagrave, and of course, being down the exchange, you must play dynamically, in the Sicilian, and I'm sure most of you Sicilian players know this, right? Being down the exchange like this, you have to, show and prove that you have adequate compensation and attacking chances. And I think Vachier Lagrave does a good job. It's just that these positions get very sharp, and everything hangs on one move. You make a mistake, and you're lost. Queen d2. And now bishop d6. Listen, black would love. Let me just move this down. Black would love to play rook takes c3 here. The problem is that this passed pawn on the d file is a killer. So for instance, rook takes c3, then d6. That forces bishop d8, and then king b2, and then you can see the rook on c3 is threatened. And so this is all forced, and everything comes off the board. And this is good for white. Queen takes a5, bishop takes in d7. All right, and this is good for white, just being up the exchange. So this is why Vachier Lagrave blockaded first with bishop d6, and then now he wants to play rook takes. But of course, white gets to move first, so he just simply plays c4. And of course, offering to exchange queens. Vachier declines, king a1, d5, c3, a4, and then, of course, there's other moves here. Giri could have played like stronger moves, but this to me is more indicative of his style than anything. Like he could have played moves like rook b1 at certain points, and basically Giri could have played more aggressive to not allow Lagrave to have such an intense attack, but this is his style. He's like, playing real in a prophylactic way, manner. He grabs his pawn, bishop takes f8-4. For instance, he could have just played maybe rook b1 here, perhaps. He grabs the pawn, bishop b3, rook c5, rook he1, bishop e5. And at this point, white still has to be very careful, right? Those two bishops are very powerful. White's king is in a precarious situation. Has to be very careful. Of course, you can see right here the idea b4. So a3 is played, rook c8, rook a1, and now b4. Okay, exploiting the pin on c3. So a takes b4, queen takes b4, and now Giri plays d6, which is a mistake. Again, he should have been played more aggressively. Giri could have played like rook a4. He plays d6, of course. Sorry about that. d6, and now rook b8, right? Just threatening to win the bishop. Even stronger is bishop e6, and that does the same thing. It brings a piece to attack b3. Reason why I like bishop e6 over rook b8 is because the bishop on f5 right now, as you can see, is out of the game. All it is guarding that pawn on e4. All right, and the queen is covering that too. But in this type of position, you can't really worry about the material, right? It's more about dynamic possibilities in attack. The rook, queen, and I'm talking about black here. The rook on c8, the queen on b4, and the bishop on e5 are all concentrated on c3. All right, so why bring a piece off of c3? Right, that rook is already gainfully employed. Why don't you take the piece that's unemployed, right? That doesn't have a job, which is this, or have a good job, which is this bishop on f5, and bring that to e6. All right, bring a useless piece back in the game. That would have been much stronger for Lagrave. Moving on, rook b8 was played instead. Rook a3. And of course, there's ideas of playing the bishop to f4. Queen b7. Again, Lagrave misses his chance. Another chance, that is. Queen b5. So you might say, well, what's the difference? Queen b5 is more aggressive and it keeps black in the fight. I'll show you a variation. So for instance, in the game, Queen b7 was played and then king c1. All right, so Giri got out of the pin and he played king c1. Now I'll show you what would happen if he played queen b5. Now queen b5, king c1. Then you could play queen c5. Notice the rook on a3 is now attacked, right? Not only is the rook on a3 attacked, but now bishop f4 is also threatened. Okay, so black is facing white with a dilemma here, right? He's attacking two things at once. So, dilemmas are great because you can't solve both problems. An attack you can deal with, right? One attack, one defense. Dilemma you can't. Okay, so the rook on a3 will be attacked, queen a2, and now you play bishop f4 again, giving black the type of counterplay that he needs in the position. Not only is it threatening to win the rook right there on e3, but notice the pawn on c3 is also unprotected as a result of the pin initiated by that bishop. Queen b7, that's what was played during the game. So just know queen b5 was stronger. King c1, and we're going through this game fast. Queen d7, we're already on move 38. Queen d7 by Lagrave. Now some of you are saying, hey, what about bishop f4? Now, problem is that getting the exchange back loses the position for white. I'll show you. So for instance, bishop f4 here, queen d5, again threatening to trade the queens off, which black can't really afford. Queen d7, rook a8. Now trade of rooks is forced. King g7, queen just comes back, and let's say bishop takes e3, f takes e3. White is just winning here, right? Ideas like queen e5, for instance, and eventually c4, c5. There's nothing that black can really do. So yeah, he's gotten exchange back, but he's just busted here. The best black can do in this position is just play bishop d6. He's down exchange, and he's still losing here. This is why Lagrave skipped all of that, and he just played queen d7. And now you can see Giri with some similar ideas. And notice Lagrave didn't go for the exchange, right, with bishop f4. Instead, he played that. Okay, 6. And this forces some passivity. And again, this is indicative of Giri's style. He's eliminating all the counterplay, and he wants to make things as simple as possible. And so, of course, he had other alternatives here, but he just simplifies down to winning endgame. Right? He takes all the air out of Maxime's attack. Right? So now things aren't on the razor's edge for white. Now he can just simply enjoy his simple advantage. King b2, bishop takes b3, king takes b3, and now look what we have here, just simple winning endgame at move 50. And the rest really don't have to give comment on, as Giri just simply pushed the pawns up the board. I'll just comment that, hey, if rook b6, then just simply rook c3, jettisoning the e pawn and just pushing the c pawn up the board. And that's pretty much my last comment on that game. So just easy at this point technique for Grandmaster Giri, and congratulations to Giri, right, for playing a consistent game, very strong, and good fight by Lagrave. He'll get back on his feet. It's just Sicilian is difficult opening. Very difficult opening, and again, a lot of it, is determined sometimes by one tempo or one move or something like that. So after move 70, king c6, Vachier Lagrave resigned. So good game for Giri in round 9 of the Tata chess steel tournament. Thank you once again for joining me on this video. I hope you learned something. Please like, subscribe, check the links below. Also donate to my channel. It would be very helpful. And I want to thank you all again for joining me today. And again, if you know who this female chess player is, let me know in the links below, and I'll be glad to shout you out in the next video. See you soon.